Hello and welcome to another episode of A5 Evening, an all-party roundup. I'm Grant of Broken Synapse Press and A5E. I am an A5E narrator, supplement, publisher, and one of the datamancers of the A5E Datasheet. My other datamancer is Jen. Jen, you want to say a little bit about yourself?
I'm Jen. I'm a partner, data gremlin, A5E player, compendium maker. Eventually, going to get back to DMing and writing content.
Very nice.
That's also overall hype person. It's my
Yep,
real job here.
that's me too. And Allie, one of my players. How about you say a little bit about yourself, Allie?
Hello, my name's Allie. I'm one of Grant's players, and I am here to learn because I'm pretty new to the system, but I love every second of it.
And speaking of the data sheet, we have tonight Clarke Petersen, the original maker of the data sheet before I was given the reins and then have now shared the reins. But
You've done
welcome.
wonderful things with it.
Thank you very much. You want to tell us a little bit about yourself, real briefly, before we get into your talking about your project?
Yeah, I'm Clarke Petersen of Speaks and Spells Publishing. As mentioned, I was the OG data gremlin. Got started with Level Up through the Gate Pass Gazette. Did about a dozen-ish articles there. Moved into some self-publishing. The Arcane Exterminator, Secrets of the Selkies. I was the team lead for Venture Forth, which had like 10 different people on it. And my biggest project, which I'm sure we'll get into more detail about, has been Wild Magic Reimagined, which successfully funded on Kickstarter. So that's very fun.
It sure did.
Yeah,
And by far one of the most successful third-party A5E Kickstarter and crowdfunding campaign.
Now I
Um,
just have to write the stupid thing.
well, that is the tricky part. But you got people to give them money or give you money, so me included for sure. So
Absolutely me.
This is going to be real awkward otherwise.
right? Yeah. but
Friendships on the line.
yeah. All
And I
right.
feel like every time we have a guest or something, I'm always like, "You've written some of my favorite stuff," and like I've played a Selkie. I use stuff from Secrets of the Selkies in almost all of my games. And I'm working on my class, and I keep finding spells from Gay Pass Gazette, and I'm like, "Oh, but they're not SRD." And I'm like, "Wait, they're Clark spells. Maybe I should just ask one day if he'll just reprint them for me." And I'm like, "Wait." But then I get to the next person, I'm like, "Oh crap. I love their work. I love their work." And I'm like, I don't have a favorite. I don't. But is I your stuff is so good. And just want to say, like, everyone I've shown like Secrets of the Selkies to, and you just, for like I said, I use it and I have element of it in every game, has just been like, "Oh my god, this is like so good." And it's one of the ones that makes people really pay attention to third party content from what I've been introducing to people. So
Thank
just
you.
want to kudos on that.
Yeah, well, not my biggest project. Secrets of the Selkies, I think, had the most like individualism and like specific love poured into it. It's like I'm fond of all my projects, but like there's a special place in my heart for Secrets of the Selkies, just as like I don't know, there's so much more in that packet than the name suggests.
It does feel like a very like personal love letter kind of project, and I think you can tell in everything in there, which just kind of like all the archetypes are just like a very special type of play style, and the selfless sentinel tradition. Like I said, I can't say enough good things about it, but you can tell in your work that that is a very clear love letter to something, and it's just amazing. Like I said, can't say enough good things.
Thank you.
And
That's very kind.
my players have never seen a class without Venture Forth Max already pre-included. So
And
really.
that is
there's so
correct.
many people who
Yep.
deserve credit for Venture Forth. I was so privileged to work with so many talented people there.
Well, I bet, because that is a project with a lot of moving parts. And speaking of which, so like you said, that did fund successfully on Kickstarter. And do you want to? I noticed that there are still late pledges available. We will have a
Yes,
link.
there are.
We will have a link in the show notes. But you
Yes.
want to, for those who have not already backed Wild Magic Reimagined, Do you want to give a real quick elevator pitch for it?
Yeah, absolutely. Wild Magic Reimagined is, I'm going to say this definitively, the most dynamic and just best Wild Magic system ever devised. We've taken the core of what people really love about Wild Magic, and I think finally given it the space and attention that it deserves to be a really engaging and powerful resource that you can use to really like upgrade your storytelling and tell kinds of stories that really just can't be told with like conventional, predictable mechanics. So Wild Magic Reimagined, bringing in a lot of, just basically we looked at everything that people had ever wanted from Wild Magic. There's a whole bunch of other people who have done great things. But I kept looking at them and saying like, okay, you've added one great thing that I like, and you have added another great thing that I like, but I have to choose between you. I can't use you both at the same time. Like, why don't we bring these ideas all together in one place so we can finally like have all of these things that people think could improve Wild Magic and just stick them into one giant pot? Which is also the way that I generally love food. Every culture has some food that's just some variation of everything they have in the kitchen, and it's always my favorite thing from that culture.
Well,
And so that influenced Wild Magic Reimagined as well.
Okay, because that's my next question, right? What was kind of the creative inspiration for Wild Magic Reimagined?
I'm going to pull on some Aristotelianism here. Do you want the efficient cause? In other words, like what historically caused it? Or like the final cause? What is it aiming to do?
Both?
Dealer's
The
choice.
efficient
Right?
cause.
We've got time. Let's do both.
Yeah.
Oh,
The
Or
efficient
those
cause
toes.
is Shane. Because I was looking at Wild Magic as it exists in the core rules for Level Up, which, to be fair, there's a lot of pages already in Level Up. And like having tried to write a really extensive Wild Magic system that like gets the love and attention it deserves, it would have been really substantial to try to squeeze that into books that are already like almost an OSHA violation to carry around. But I was looking at it and it's just like we don't even have like the basic like 50 item Wild Magic table that you'd expect from 2014 Wild Magic Dungeons and Dragons. Or Tales of the Valiant has a very similar thing where it's like we're not even hitting that baseline and we're advanced level up. We should have a Wild Magic system like worthy of that name and tradition. And so I was seeing it's like, well, that's a space that no one's tackled yet. Let's go ahead and tackle it. And then in terms of like what kinds of things we wanted to bring in, some of the things that I saw as issues with Wild Magic that I wanted to address. First of all, Wild Magic as it's presented in its original form in the 2014 Player's Handbook attached to the Wild Magic Sorcerer is designed for the Wild Magic Sorcerer, and it makes it hard to use in any other context. The classic example being the effect that like restores sorcery points to you. Try to use that anywhere else, kind of boring, kind of useless. So I was like, we're going to make a Wild Magic system that can be added to anything, and that's mostly been an exercise in restraint. It's been an exercise in saying like, we're not going to have things that, to the extent possible, assume facts about the creature that triggered Wild Magic. So mostly, the common one that I have to avoid is things that assume that the trigger is going to be casting a spell. Because the Wild Magic system in Wild Magic Reimagined doesn't require spell casting. You can attach it to non-casters. And in fact, through the stretch goals in the Kickstarter, we're doing, the whole suite of like martial classes from the things that are in common with 2014 Dungeons and Dragons. Although we've also got some expansions planned to cover some of our favorite non-core classes, like our marshals and artificers, and a couple of other famous favorite third-party classes. But that's one of the biggest things is like I want to be able to say like, hey, like what about Wild Magic that triggers every time you lie? There's some storytelling potential there. Like what about Wild Magic that triggers when you break your promise to an archfey? There's so many kinds of stories that get unlocked if you break away from the assumption that Wild Magic has to be a reaction to spellcasting. So that's the biggest number one thing. Second is that Wild Magic, one of the things that's frustrating about adding Wild Magic as a GM is that like it's inherently chaotic, and so there's a lot of uncertainty and ambiguity. It's like, how much are you adding or taking away? It's like, is this going to break things if I throw it in too much? So one of our goals was to try to make the balance of Wild Magic as obvious as possible, in a way that you can feel really confident as to how much you are adding or taking away without needing to do a whole bunch of math and like sort through all the tables and check the effects and try to evaluate them. The simple way that we do that is sort of a twofold method. First of all the Wild Magic effects are ranked by tier, not equivalent to the tiers of play exactly, but basically 5 levels. They're each basically correspond to like 2 levels of spells. So level 1 is like appropriate for like cantrips and level 1 spells, and they sort of have effects that are in that same level of power. And then up to tier 5, which is in the range of like level 8th and 9th level spells. We're getting effects that match that kind of intensity. So when you are adding Wild Magic, you can say like, you know what, we're not ready for accidentally casting Meteor Swarm. We're just going to remove those effects for now. We're going to keep it kind of low level. Or it's just like, no, we're not messing around anymore. Get rid of all the low-level stuff. Like, we're only doing the high-powered, high-stakes wild magic here. Like, that's what's appropriate for the narrative at this moment. So that's the first thing. And then the second thing is that every single effect has a neutral, a positive, and a negative version for the creature that triggered wild magic. We call them wheel, balance, and well. Positive, balanced, and neutral, and negative. And what that means is that instead of needing to balance a table as a whole and saying like, okay, we have this many positive effects and this many negative effects and this many neutral effects, every single effect contributes the same amount to balance, and that balance is decided with a die roll. So if you want the wild magic to lean more positive or more negative or more neutral, you just change the values on the die roll, and you don't have to worry about, if I'm, adding in more positive effects, is that going to, make my character overpowered? If I'm adding in more negative effects, is that too dangerous? Every effect contributes the same amount to the power, and then adjusting it is simply a question of rolling a die and adjusting the range of results in which the wild magic triggers. So that's kind of the big thing as far as shaping balance. And then kind of I think the big final ingredient as far as really nailing down the storytelling potential is divvying up wild magic into different themes. Because if you are a warlock who's making a dastardly evil pact, why should your wild magic be summoning unicorns? That, like, it seems as though magic should go wild in a way that respects its origin. And so we've divided it into like a couple of different themes, which we've named corruption, growth, intellect, passion, and virtue. I can go into more details about those later, but long story short, they're rip-offs of the 5 colors from Magic the Gathering.
Legally distinct.
They're legally distinct.
Legally distinct, but yes.
They're legally distinct, but
Look,
they're
we're
very
sticking
intentionally...
with Hasbro. Careful properties right here.
We are very intentionally alluding to that. This is not a Magic the Gathering project in any way. It doesn't reference anything from Magic the Gathering, but there's so many settings that are available that integrate that same sort of schema because Hasbro owns both of those properties, that I wanted people who are playing in those kinds of settings to see really quickly. It's like, oh, I'm playing, like Silverquill from Strixhaven, the university one.
Oh, Strixhaven, yeah.
Yeah. It's like, okay, well, like, corruption and virtue correspond to black and white. So I know that using that wild magic set is going to be broadly applicable to the kind of character that I want to play. Which, by the way, important thing there is that I've mentioned that there are 5 attributes. You can also mix and match them. So you can make 2 color or 2 theme combinations, which is really great. I love the idea of, maybe being a cleric warlock multi-class, and having magic that draws from both corruption and virtue as like the 2 sides of your magic, like try to fight it out for your soul. There's so many different possibilities there. So that's kind of the broad spectrum of different improvements that we brought into Wild Magic. And there's honestly even some more things that I could say, but that's the heart of it.
I love it. I have a black and white deck in Magic that I love, so I'm like, corruption and virtue sound great.
Yeah.
And I was
I
really
learned Magic over
about
the course of one weekend. Forgot everything.
Oh. But I guess, yeah. Can you say a little bit more to maybe some of the other themes? Because I was really interested in how you see those kind of implementing into the system, how players or narrators could use, like intellect, passion, the other ones that maybe.
Yeah. So I like to think of them in alphabetical order. So I'll start in that way. Corruption is all your dark evil stuff, and I think my training in like philosophy and theology has sort of like influenced my take on this, in that like a lot of the corruption effects at their core are about negation and draining things away. So a lot of the the curse effects are all in there, as well as all the things that deal with some of our favorite categories of villains, our undead, our fiends, our aberrations, cults. One of the things I should mention here is that, like, you know what? Never mind. Too complicated. We're gonna move forward, and maybe we'll loop back to that. Then growth, generally nature magic. You're playing a druid. Your first reaction should be to grab the growth set. Intellect has to do with sort of the rules of reality, and has a lot of effects that change the rules of the game and makes, is very much the kind of thing that wants you to approach it as a puzzle. Passion has a lot of emotion-themed effect and consequently a lot of elemental effects, which, sort of act as a visual shorthand for emotion. It's the set most likely to just kill you. It's where our fireball is. We've got some special things in there about how we've adjusted the classic, like, you cast fireball on yourself in a way that I think preserves the heart of why that effect is famous, but also addresses some of its problems. But the passion set, if you're looking for, something simple and just, do some random damage, there's a lot of fun things in the passion set. And then finally, virtue is our holy divine magic, but also, bringing in a little bit of the mortal side of virtue as well. We didn't want to go just purely divine, but there's definitely a strong, cleric herald through line going through that set.
Now, I guess I'm curious, what might be like your favorite part or something that you're really, I guess, keyed in on in this, set that you created?
I do know you're a big fan of some of the art you have commissioned for it.
I am definitely a huge fan of some of the art that I've commissioned. That's been the real fun of having some Kickstarter money, is that I get to go to really brilliant artists, and like every other day I've got a message in my inbox saying like, hey, what do you think of this masterpiece? There's some really exciting stuff. I mean, one of the ones that we posted recently to the Speaks and Spells Publishing Discord was the art for the Maddening Worm, which is a wild magic aberrant dragon, which Peter, everyone's favorite Peter, designed and gave it one of the most terrifying reactions I've ever seen, where if you teleport within 120 feet of it, no saving throw, it just grabs you out of the ether and grapples you.
That's fun.
Okay.
Yes.
Right?
Evil DM cackling commences.
Exactly. And it's just one of those things where it's like, he originally wrote it with a saving throw, and I'm like, no, take it out. Like, it's always something they can avoid, but like, you don't want to have the opportunity for that to happen. Maybe it comes up once in a fight. You don't want that to be something that's lost. You want that to be something that's, an obvious dramatic moment. So I really, really love that.
Certainly, and there's ways you
That
can
is-
signpost that as well, and if you
Yeah,
want,
it's something
if
you can
want,
get around. You learn, I can't teleport in this
I
fight
can't
unless I want to be
teleport, or
grappled.
like maybe there's a
Right.
sign in like that you can see before, like half of a person.
But still, it's just
it's just like
wow. And the artist came out with the art for this. Oh my gosh. I think if I can share my screen, I should be able to pull something up here.
Sounds great.
Yeah.
You can do that.
Yeah, let me.
One of my favorite things to do is come up with like these really horrifying monster concepts and stuff, but I'm terrible at the mathematical balance of it. So I just give all these horrifying ideas and be like, just please take this. So like I was talking to someone was like, oh, how about a elder brain flump?
right, can you see?
Love it.
The thing is terrifying and amazing.
Yeah, this is beautiful nightmare fuel.
I will not sleep for 3 days, and I am excited.
Exactly.
I would want to be a friend.
I've been really focusing on like a lot of the corruption stuff recently, so it's just been like an exercise in asking what's the worst thing I can think of, and how do I like find a positive spin on that.
Well, there's that art in there, and I have some logistics type questions for you, Clarke. I know that some late pledges are still open.
Yes.
How long is that going to last?
That's going to last basically up until we're placing the order for manufacturing. So that's going to be open for the better part of this year. Yeah, we want to make sure that when we're finalizing late pledges, we've got the most accurate addresses that we can for anyone who needs to move, or any other unforeseen circumstances that come in. So we're just leaving that open. I know there's advantages to saying like we're closing late pledges and like get it in now, and we'll have those advantages down the line. But right now we're still accepting orders.
Fair enough. And then so like you said, if late pledges are open for the better part of this coming year, fulfillment is sometime in 2027 would be my guess.
If everything goes to schedule, digital fulfillment should be in fall of this year, fall of 2026. Physical fulfillment should be spring of 2027.
Okay. Well, that is even sooner than I thought. So
this is contingent on everything going to schedule.
Naturally. Yeah.
I'm sure that like everyone who runs a Kickstarter for the first time figures out the hazards involved in that. But, I'm trying to identify like where the bottlenecks are. Spoiler alert, the bottlenecks are me, and find the ways to streamline things and try to get like multiple tracks running in parallel.
And then you had mentioned that you have playtests coming up.
Yeah.
So who are those open to?
The playtest document will be open to everyone who has purchased at least the PDF or has pre-ordered at least the PDF. If you've done that, we're going to be posting that in a way that's available to all backers and anyone who late pledges. Or if you have a generous friend who did that, you can always leech off of them.
Okay.
But yeah, the new playtest we've sort of rearranged the way that we're working on this to try to do like complete vertical slices. So you'll get a subsection of everything in the book in one playtest packet. So for our first one, we're doing everything that ties in like strictly to the corruption theme, because that's been one of the most in-demand things that people have wanted to see. I think it's a really valuable tool for DMs. It's also first alphabetically, so checks all those boxes.
That is wonderful. And when is that opening up? Is this
Can't give exact dates yet, but
okay.
In my most recent update, I sort of gave a progress report of how close that is to being done. I think that by the time that I post the next update, it's either going to say, here's the playtest document, or you'll have already had it.
Okay, so probably sometime within the next couple months. A month. Okay, beautiful. Wonderful. Yep. All right.
I wanted to circle back because this is, in fact, the largest Kickstarter of A5E and a lot of tabletop that I've seen, but it's not just because of the decks and things like that, but you have added subclasses, you're adding monsters, you're adding calamities, you have, I think, dice and their cards. It felt like every time I would get an email from your Kickstarter, it was like, but wait, there's more. And we're all very used to in the community and being very blessed at immediate PDF fulfillment and books.
Yeah, Ian Publishing said that.
Yeah, what possessed you is, I guess, the greatest question, to be like, oh, wait, there's more. And let's add this on top of this. Like, it could have been so easy to just gone with like archetypes and tables, but you are spoiling so many communities with all this extra content to really make this so robust of a system for what's really one shred of a mechanic that in 2014 gets 2 mentions.
So there's a couple of different answers to that depending on what part we're talking about having added. So I'll take it sort of in pieces.
Go for it.
A big part of Wild Magic Reimagined is that I don't want it to be a system that is just me saying like, here are the options that I've provided, take them or leave them. I want them to be like, here's the things that I've provided. Go and add them to whatever game mechanics you want, even things from like their other third-party products. We're really working on making sure that that's all cross-compatible. So the monsters and magic items especially, they're all presented as variants of existing monsters and magic items as a way of letting you see like, okay, here's examples of how you can take a monster or magic item and how you might twist it to incorporate some wild magic in some interesting ways. There's also less interesting, simpler ways that you can incorporate wild magic, and there's no shame in that. But if we're going to be including it in the book, we want to be like earning our pay as designers. Sort of like a tutorial and an introduction and an appetizer as to like what you could do with the system. Archetypes, I also just love them. Love me some new subclasses, and it's just like, I wanted the opportunity to really play with like, okay, we've seen what you can do if you're like adding stuff on top. What happens? What possibilities open up if we have access to all of these new mechanics from the beginning? So the archetypes are really a space to play with that. And also just like having been in the third-party publishing space for a while, like archetypes, they sell. People love them. Like, and it's one of the few things that like players really get to control if it's added to the game. A lot of the rest of the content is, in many ways like narrator or GM focused, but like your choice of subclass is something that you as a player always have control over most of the time, unless I don't know what happens at your table. There's some crazy things that can go on, but that was the big reason that we wanted to do that. Calamities are a thing that we haven't gotten to talk about yet, but they're a huge part of the book. Yeah, calamities are for the moments of like, we need a wild magic effect, and like 9th level spells aren't gonna cut it. We need something that really goes above and beyond what really can be adequately expressed in any game mechanic. And so they operate very differently. While most of the, all the other wild magic effects in the game have like, positive or neutral variants, calamities are always a problem. They're always a challenge that is presented to the players. And as a consequence, they're only ever available to the GM to introduce. Players might accidentally trigger them, but it's up to the GM as to whether or not they're coming in. They really act like writing prompts. So one of the first ones that we ever previewed was Time Slip, which is the classic, like, you and your party, or whatever range of innocent bystanders happen to be in the area, are thrown backwards and forwards in time. That's a really annoying thing to express mechanically, but it's such a really fun story thing to do. And so it was really a fun opportunity to say, like, okay, what kinds of stories can we tell there? And like, what are the things that you need to keep in mind if you're going to tell a time travel story? And it's just one of those things where it's like, I can't leave that out. It feels like such a classic, it's one of the ways that we tie into that idea of a magical disaster that we're incorporating from fiction. A lot of the calamities are really like simple at their heart, but with the idea that you can twist them to adjust to any setting. So, like, you could take the classic time travel calamity, the time slip, and say, like, okay, let's do that as the Groundhog Day version, where you're going to get stuck in a time loop. I could go on about this for a long time if you let me.
Yeah.
But yes, I think that calamities were a super necessary part of the book as a way of saying, like, there's a space that mechanics just can't capture, that you just need the narrative introduction for. So calamities are a way of introducing that. As far as all the physical bobs and doodads, there's definitely a version, there's an alternate timeline in which I publish a couple tables on DriveThruRPG, it's downloadable as a PDF, and we're done. But I really think that one of the things that introduces a lot of ease of play and, even some extra, like, mechanical possibilities are having the Wild Magic effects printed on cards. And I'm going to release, print and play options for people who are more budget conscious. But I was looking at, like, the price for print on demand cards at DriveThruRPG, and I was just like, that is prohibitively expensive. And admittedly, like, even with the Kickstarter and the advantages of mass production, the cards are still expensive. There's 800 cards that come with Wild Magic Reimagined. But it's way cheaper than it would be if you got it on DriveThruRPG, and I think it adds so much to the game. And there's a lot of people who have opted in to get the cards. It's the book plus the cards as a physical product, I think, is the most popular tier that people have subscribed to.
Yeah, I've been really printing out cards for spells and stuff, and I love cards for things like this. It just makes it, like I said, so easy. Put it in a box, put it in some sleeves, you've got them lasting. So it's genius. And I think I remember you talking about that pricing difference, but like that's almost a foregone conclusion as the best way to distribute that product. But you even went further. It was like every email's, but wait, there's more. But wait, there's more. And I was like, you are the most generous person, or the craziest I know.
Yep, it was a fun Kickstarter to follow and back.
It really was.
Just for that. So.
But yeah, I think the cards were a huge impetus as to, like, why this went to Kickstarter at all. And the realization that, like, this only reaches its full potential as a physical product. And so then a whole bunch of other little physical bobs and doodads came along with that, including gemstone dice. We get to make gemstone dice.
I know, I saw that. Yes.
I had to restrain myself so hard as also dice goblin, being like, but no, I already have enough dice. It's the first time I ever said that phrase to myself.
Do you ever have enough dice?
No. My bank account said yes at that time. And then, so, kind of just in there, you talk, like I said, you really want to introduce this whole system and things like that. And you have all these great mechanical things that are brought in there based off of the magic deck, based off of,
Yes.
Legally distinct speaking. Did you consider, or is there a space for some of those, like, silly whimsical effects by, like, you turn blue, or you turn into a potted plant?
So in many ways, I think that this is one of the tensions in Wild Magic that I sort of have to address. On one hand, I think that Wild Magic deserves the space to be serious sometimes, right? The corruption deck, I think, especially, like, can lend itself to giving Wild Magic that kind of darker tone. At the same time, the fact that Wild Magic is themed, I think, actually increases the possibilities for humor. I mentioned earlier about, like, if you're, a dark and evil pact, like, why is your Wild Magic summoning unicorns? But the answer to that can be, yeah, your Wild Magic keeps summoning unicorns. This, like, for whatever reason, like, you are trying to be Mr. Edgy Edgelord, and, like, all of your Wild Magic is about puppies and butterflies. Like, that's a beautiful level of comedy in of itself. And at the same time, I've also been thinking just about, like, okay, where all of the themes, like, want different kinds of things to happen. And there is, I think, a particular combination where the thing that the magic wants to happen is whimsy, and that's the midway point between passion and intellect, right? The sheer like gut emotional joy of a joke, as well as like the logical puzzle of like substitution, suggests to me that like when passion and intellect magic fuse, weird funny stuff should happen, right? That magic wants to be funny. Yeah, I think if you want to get the gist of Wild, like the fun stuff of Wild Magic Reimagined, but still like sort of preserve a lot of the tone of the original table, use passion and intellect as a combination. That's going to get you the closest to what people are familiar with.
We spent all this time talking about, world ending and campaign ending options and, monsters that grab you out of midair. And I was
At least one of the effects that I've written so far has a galleon falling out of the sky.
That would end a lot of people's day.
Well, you get a couple rounds to see it falling out of the sky.
But the thing is massive. Like, are you gonna really get out of the way? It's like watching a dragon fall. Can you really survive? I mean, challenge accepted also, because
well, if you roll the good version, you get to choose where it lands. That's the fun part.
Well, fair enough. Have it land on a dragon.
Yeah.
Yes.
Furiously takes notes.
Yes.
You're right. Like, wait a second.
All right, so I know, because I'm sure Allie's gonna have a much better question at the end of this. For everyone, what is your favorite, or do you have a favorite moment of wild magic just causing utter chaos or whimsy or campaign ending shenanigans from the original? Obviously original 2014 is probably our most common use of it, but whatever are like our favorite stories or anything about that, because we all have a story. I'm sure we all have a story. So want to go first, Clarke?
This is another one of those things, I talked about in the introduction to Secrets of the Selkies. I talk about how like the first campaign I ever ran had a Selkie as sort of the inciting incident. It was also the case that the guy who really brought me into role-playing games, one of my best friends, was a player in that campaign and decided to play a wild magic sorcerer. So, it's also very much tied into that memory of like my first time behind the screen. I'm trying to think what's the best specific moment of wild magic that occurred. Towards the end of where we sort of left off, his character ends up split in two for reasons that are separate from wild magic. But he has a moment where after the split in two, he rolls the effect where his age changes, and we decide that both characters age in different directions, which really helps him out because he's just like, I was really having difficulty like theatrically distinguishing who was talking at any given time. So it's like now we've got like the tween and like the adults.
All right, you got one, Grant?
I do not actually, but as somebody who never really plays wild magic, that's kind of why I'm looking forward to your book, Clarke, because that's not really where my strengths lie as a narrator. So,
do you not remember the one shot we did with the Fey World? I was an orange tabaxi. So I was a tabaxi, and my theme was orange cat energy.
One brain cell lost to someone else.
Yep. And we went into the Fey World, and I can't remember what triggered wild magic, but like everything I did. And I was like, oh no, I'm gonna die because I'm playing this as a curious and dumb cat. But I survived. I think I was in a bush with all my armor on backwards. I can't remember what else, but it was a time.
So I had, in one of my first big long campaign, I had a friend of mine. She played opposite of what happened to you, Clarke. Or your friend was two characters merged into one from a wild magic accident. So she had a wild magic sorcerer and a dragonborn fighter, and they merged together. And she really wanted to go build into this chaos of wild magic. So we had increasing chances of wild magic every time she cast a spell. And she rolled terribly all the time. So she kept triggering wild magic all the time. And she kept rolling, turning blue for ages. And then we got to a island that I had done, which was wild magic, which is why I'm also really looking forward to the Wild Magic Reimagined. And we cleared the turning blue, but then she kept rolling turning blue to the point where our cleric was like,
I at that point that she turns ultraviolet.
We were like, the cleric was like, I refuse to cast Remove Curse on you from now until eternity because you just keep turning blue again. And so it was just really that whimsy of it that kind of really made that campaign very good for me as the first big campaign. And so kind of like I had that special space for Wild Magic in my heart for that behind the screen memory.
Yeah.
Fair enough.
It can be fun.
I mean, it does sound fun.
Yeah.
Everything in Wild Magic Reimagined does sound fun to me, which is why I backed it. So,
Right. And I love an element of chaos.
and that's why we're having Clarke on tonight. But
Really, I think a big thing that Wild Magic Reimagined is trying to do is like act as a bridge between the people who really want like a lot of extra chaos brought to the game and like the people who want some ability to like control the levers attached to it. I think that it acts as a beautiful, I don't want to say compromise, I think it acts as a beautiful synthesis of those two desires.
that's a good spot to end that segment. And then by that, so Clarke, where can people find you, follow you, get all that information for Wild Magic Reimagined? We will, of course, have links in the show notes.
Yeah, easiest thing to do right now is to just go to the Kickstarter page for Wild Magic Reimagined. There's a button where you can late pledge there. It'll redirect you to a website called Hive, which is doing our pledge management. You can late pledge there, and also, all the updates are presently working there. We're working on getting a full like dedicated website built for it. That's not super high on the priority list right now. Highest priority is getting the actual thing written. But that's the best place to start, is go to the Kickstarter page, start poking around.
Can we do my final question before
The
we
other
go?
parts, but yes, we could do your
Okay.
final question before. Yes.
Okay. I like to end with this question.
Yes.
Just,
Let's hear it.
what's your favorite character you've ever played? Or if you are like the perpetual narrator, what character would you like to play? And why?
I'm thinking about what's my favorite character that I've ever played. Gosh, so many of them have like, near and dear spaces in my heart. I think I'm gonna go with my Marshal. It was a Minotaur Marshal, but it sort of presented more as like a bison, and I played it with a lot of Team Dad energy, and also like I played it with very much like the player ethos of like I want to go into this exercising, the virtue of humility and like spotlighting others, and so it was just a really great. I felt good walking away from any session playing them, because I know that I spent that session trying to figure out how to highlight my teammates and like give them time to shine. Like there was a fight where we're fighting a dragon. We've got like people who have really not played Dungeons Dragons or any other TTRPG at the table before. One of them is playing a rogue, decent character to like come into the game with if you're not familiar. It's my turn. I use the Marshal's ability to tell them to sneak attack the dragon, and they land a killing blow, and everyone applauds them. And it felt really good to me to be like, I got to give that to someone and let them have the shining moment.
That
The
just,
assist.
from what I know of you, Clarke, that is also just seems very peak you as well. So
That is the most like Clarke thing I've ever heard.
I know,
don't
right?
know why, but like it's like Peter being Treat Williams 2.0. It's just like now knowing you, that makes so much more sense.
Well, thank you very much.